Hey y'all, 1776 Duck here. Hope you're having a wonderful day, and I hope you're carrying a 1911 today. And that is going to be the topic of our video today. We're going to go over some 1911 myths, some tips, maybe even some Fudd lore, if you will. And this is going to hopefully arm you with some more knowledge to be able to purchase your 1911 with more confidence, carry your 1911 with more confidence, and shoot your 1911 with more confidence. Because at the end of the day, my crusade, if you will, is to try to get people to carry, shoot, and use 1911 so that we may reject the polymer usurpers that have taken this country, so that we can put the 1911 back on the throne that it deserves to be on. So with that, we're going to discuss a few things here. Now listen, I started writing, and keep in mind, I've got the notes here, and you know what that means. That means it's sarsaparilla time. Grab you a cheerwine, crack that thing open, because this is going to be a minute. But I really started to get into the minutia, if you will, and I kind of was like, man, there's a lot of stuff to cover. So this is probably not going to cover everything that I want to cover, but I'm kind of leaving a little meat on the bone so we can have a part 2 potentially. Now, I also want you to get in the comments and kind of ask your questions. What do you want to know about a 1911? Is there something that intimidates you about the pistol that maybe I can walk you through and make you a little more comfortable with it? Whatever it is, I want to know so we can discuss it, so I can better arm you to carry the greatest handgun that has ever been made. So let's get straight into what is a 1911. Now it should be a fairly straightforward kind of concept. However, when I was doing some research for this video, I realized that a lot of folks, they come at you with these 1911 tips, how to shoot your 1911, how to use your 1911, all these things that I'm trying to show you today. And I'll be honest with you, none of them really seem like they love the 1911. A lot of them seem like if you lift up their shirt on any given day, it would be some sort of plastic, fantastic piece of shit from across the pond. And I ain't going to be like that. As you may know, I'm kind of a 1911 guy. I've surrounded myself with people who are 1911 experts. I am anything but a 1911 expert. In fact, I'm a student of the pistol. All I do and all I want to do is read, learn, watch, and consume everything I can regarding the 1911, so that I can then give you this information and make you someone who is more confident around the gun. And what I've noticed is that a lot of people don't talk about what exactly a 1911 is. And again, bear with me, I've got a lot of stuff on my brain, and to prevent myself from going off kilter, getting on my soapbox, it will happen, I'm sure, but to prevent me for this video from being too long, I do have notes, and so just bear with me for going back and forth. So let's talk about what a 1911 is. So let's just grab one of my favorites. This is going to be an Alchemy Prime Elite. I'll probably try to throw up some pictures at the same time, but most of the stuff we can do just talking to one another. So the 1911 is typically a single action, single stack handgun. It utilizes Browning's tilting barrel design, and keep in mind, this is a culmination of over a decade of trial and error between Browning, Colt, and the United States military. I mean, there's a lot of thought that went into this pistol. There's a lot of thought that goes into a lot of guns, but if you go back and look at the evolution of the 1911, and there are plenty of great videos on YouTube about that. In fact, my favorite, and one of my favorite YouTube channels in general, CNR Arsenal maybe, I think is the correct way to say that. They have the full lineage of every gun leading up to the 1911, and of course, a lot of digestive hours on the 1911 itself. So if you're interested in what led to the greatest pistol of all time, highly suggest you run out and watch their videos, but wait until you watch this one. The gun itself is a short recoil action breech lock system, and it utilizes the recoil force of the expended round to unlock the breech block here and the lugs in the barrel, and push the slide rearward and then bring the slide back forward with the use of the reaction spring. Now, here's an important part about the whole breech lock system. You are a part of this ecosystem. You are a part of what helps the 1911 run. A lot of folks I've found in my, of course, working for Alchemy Custom Weaponry, I do a lot of demo days. And a lot of people who are not used to 1911s, you can find that out pretty quickly because they're going to limp wrist the gun. What's limp wristing? Well, it's when you don't have a tight, locked wrist or not a tight grip. And this also, by the way, can provide a number of other malfunctions. But this, the issue of feeding the round is a typical one from lip wristing. And so they don't really have a good grip on the gun. They allow the gun to go too far back. The gun really doesn't have anything to kind of hold itself as the slide comes back and then comes forward. And what happens is you have a failure to feed most of the time. Sometimes you can even have failures to eject. You really want to have a good tight grip on the gun, okay? It's just how it is. It's an old world pistol. Have a good damn grip on your gun. Stop wearing gloves to the gym. Maybe then you'll develop a good grip. So, you're a part of that. Now, I do want to take this moment to talk about what I just mentioned. Some of you might be kind of scratching your head. The reaction spring. What is that? Well, it's now known as the recoil spring. Obviously, it was originally known in the patent paperwork as the reaction spring. And I like that term a lot better than recoil spring. When we use the term recoil spring, we kind of believe that we can really tune the softness of the gun's recoil, or as a lot of folks my age like to say, take away the recoil of the pistol by tuning that reaction spring. Really, where everything as far as unlocking the gun and creating a softer recoil impulse is at the back of the gun, the mainspring housing, your hammer geometry, your firing pin stop, even things as little as your barrel fit. Well, that's not little, that's a pretty important one. Your barrel fit and your frame to slide fit. Now, I don't subscribe to the belief that a frame to slide fit is necessary for an accurate pistol. I think that the barrel fit is chief among everything, but what I have found is that tighter fitting pistols in the frame to slide fit, that friction going rearward seems to kind of retard the pistol's unlocking even further. So what I found is that tight fitting pistols typically have a softer recoil impulse. Now, as I kind of want to go back to the reaction spring, why was it called the reaction spring? Well, its main function in the pistol is to bring the slide forward and load the next round. You'll notice that on a lot of people, Larry Vickers is big on it too, from things I've watched on him. For a lot of people that are going to be using the gun in abrasive environments, they typically want to bring up the reaction spring strength so that the gun has a little bit more positive kind of the slide going forward, reloading the pistol. And that's so it can kind of push through crud, mud, excess carbon, that sort of thing. I'll be honest with you, on a 45 caliber pistol, you'd be real hard pressed to beat the classic 23-pound mainspring, 16-pound reaction spring. So, I'm going to be honest, for what 99.9% of people that are going to be watching this video using the gun for self-defense or on the range, hopefully you carry it for self-defense and don't just, delegate it to range duty. But what most of you are going to be using the pistol for in a 45 5-inch gun, I would stick to that formula and not really go off of that. So that's a little kind of tip for you there. And of course, this is sort of my opinion on that one. A lot of people are going to have many different opinions about it, and that's fine. But I'm just telling you what I think is best for the average civilian that's going to be carrying the gun. So, we talk about the 1911. The design is inherently accurate. It's easy to shoot. It's reliable. A lot of people, we're going to get into that later, a lot of people want to say the 1911 is not reliable, and those people have either, not used a good 1911. Listen, that's kind of a thing. You got to have a good one for it to work well, or they're just plain idiots. That's also another one. So, if you really understand the pistol, if you're really a savant of the 1911, you'll find that very rarely does the gun malfunction, and if it does, it's typically ammunition or magazine related. If your gun's in good shape, it's going to work fine. And of course, the only other thing that a lot of new age people don't like is there are multiple points that you kind of need to be right on a 1911 for it to run right, but when they are, it runs fine. and there's no issues. It's just things you have to keep up with, you know. We've gotten too used to this sort of, you know, set it and forget it kind of mentality. But, you know, hey, you know, when you take your gun apart and clean it, check your extractor tension, check your ejector, check these things so that your gun is in the best condition it possibly can be when you stick it in your damn pants to carry it for self-defense. Okay, these people who go about doing this whole, I ain't cleaned my gun, you know, my gun's so reliable, I ain't cleaned it in, you know, I don't really have to go far for that accent, right? I ain't cleaned it ever, and my gun works fine. Why? Why are you doing that to yourself? You're setting yourself up for failure, even if your gun has gone 20,000 rounds without cleaning. That's ridiculous. But, you know, you're setting yourself up for failure. When you get into a gunfight, and listen, I'm not a gunfighter, I'm just kind of telling you what makes sense. When you get into a gunfight, everything is an advantage. Your gun being in the best shape that it possibly can be in is an advantage. So clean it. I mean, it's not even that hard, and sometimes it's therapeutic. Put on a damn movie, watch, you know, a Western. Damn it, watch a Western every once in a while, okay? It makes you a better man. Put on a Western, clean your damn gun, you'll be fine. All right, so with that, let's move on to our next, you know, kind of topic of discussion. There's many, by the way, a plethora, if you will. And this is going to be cocked and lock carry, super hotly debated in the 1911 world. You've probably heard a Fudd come up and say, yeah, Sonny, John Browning designed that gun to be carried cocked and locked. Well, that's not necessarily true. Now, cocked and lock carry is the way to go. It is the only way you should carry a 1911. However, that's not always been the case. Now, before I go on the whole speaking with certainty of things, in the pre-war period, when the 1911 was first introduced, there were plenty of people who carried the gun cocked and locked. It happened, people kind of figured it out, they started carrying it. You especially see this with gunfighters. People who were really relying on their handgun, they typically found cocked and locked carry was the way to go. However, for a general, you know, use perspective, you know, that was not the case. Now, Jeff Cooper is kind of noted as popularizing the, you know, new school of using the 1911 in the post-war period with the cocked and locked function. You know, but the original design was for the gun, and this is a 1919 Colt. This is actually one that was rebuilt by Nighthawk for me back in the day. This is like one of my first custom guns, and I kept it pretty stock. I mean, if you really didn't know what you were looking at, you wouldn't know that this is a new gun. But anyways, not the point. If you look at this gun, it's got a big wide spur hammer. We have to understand the time period in which the 1911 came about. The United States was using a mixture of, you know, 1892 Colt double-action revolvers. It was using a plethora of, there are plenty of double-action revolvers, in fact, not just that one. Plenty of double-action revolvers. The cavalry and a lot of other units had kind of went back to the single-action army because they wanted a 45 caliber pistol. Of course, that led to the 1911 being in 45 ACP. But a lot of people don't realize this was the first automatic that kind of usurped, I like that word, I've been watching a lot of history stuff, the revolver. And so you have to understand the mindset was not there to carry the gun with the hammer back, because if you came from using a revolver, you would never carry the gun with the hammer back. It just was not something that kind of computed. And in fact, if you want to kind of try to one-up me on this, you're not going to, by the way, you need to look at the original patents, okay? Listen, that's my kind of big dick on the table there. You know, everybody wants to argue with me about this. Guess what? John Browning himself wrote in the patent that this is how the gun was supposed to be used. The United States military has in their handbook, this is how the gun was supposed to be used. And even if that ain't good enough for you, let me introduce you to the cavalry swivel holster that first accompanied the 1911. Again, keep in mind, the cavalry board was kind of the you know, the head of the table when it came to picking the new service sidearm. They were the kind of the ones that were the most picky about it. And of course, a lot of the attributes of the 1911 we know today came from the horse mafia. But understand that their holster, you could not even holster and close the flap on that holster without the 1911 with the hammer in the up position. So that kind of covers that. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about the modern use of the 1911 and cocked and locked. It is not difficult for someone to look at this gun with its large hammer, short grip safety, and say, yep, you know what, I can understand that gun being something that as you draw the gun, you can cock it. And of course, as we know from the patent video that I did for Alchemy, even the hammer's geometry in relation to the grip safety was designed as such that one could push back on the hammer, depress the grip safety, thus allowing you to press the trigger and lift the hammer up safely. I mean, these are things that are in the original patent, that are in the original military handbooks that kind of address the gun really being designed to be drawn and cocked. Now, of course, you say, oh, well, it's got a thumb safety. Why didn't they use it? Now, the thumb safety was a little bit of a fail-safe at that time. A lot of cavalry guys, you know, you don't want to be doing, let's say you cock your gun, boom, 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 you know, you got a bunch of Villistas after you. You didn't think I'd say that right, did you? But I did. You got a bunch of Villistas after you in the punitive campaign. You know, you popped off 5 of them, but guess what? They've got more than you do. You got to do a little bit of a retreat. You're on horseback. You think to yourself, I want to make the gun safe. Should I depress the grip safety with the hammer, pull the trigger, and lift the hammer up? No, that's how you put a 45 in the back of your own horse and you become an infantryman. By the way, not a great place to be if you're a cavalry guy. And so what the thumb safety was designed, if you were under stress, boom, safety's on, gun's safe, back in the holster. Whenever you get somewhere that's safe, you can then make the gun as however you want it to be, as far as condition goes. And when we look at the geometry of a modern 1911, it's not even close to being made to use in that original fashion of cocking the hammer. Let's take, I want to use a different gun. Let's take my LA Comp, okay? The LA Comp uses a ring hammer, by the way, introduced to the 1911-1949, and let's get this out of the way. It's okay to call it a ring hammer, damn it. Yes, it was first introduced on the Colt Commander. Yes, it is the first time that this hammer was seen, but on the original advertisements for this hammer, it was called the Mauser ring style hammer, okay? Obviously taking a lot of inspiration from the Mauser C96 broom handle. So anyways, with that out of the way, this is really not a good hammer for cocking. I mean, yes, you can do it, but it's really not made for that. And also larger grip safeties, especially modern ones where they have the pocket for the hammer. Yes, you can still get in there, push back on the grip safety and kind of depress it, but it's pretty difficult and not something I would want to do, especially with the round in the chamber. So, you know, these guns are made 100% to be carried, you know, with the hammer cocked and obviously the thumb safety on. So make no mistake, while the original intent was for the gun to be carried, you know, with the hammer up, the modern technique, and obviously the guns have adopted that in their own design, the modern technique is to carry cocked and locked. So carry cocked and locked, it's the correct way to do that. All right, moving on, and we're going to kind of stay in the realm of safeties on the 1911. Let's talk a little bit about safety. So of course you have the original design. Now, the original design it's been well documented, and it has been for 100 years, that it's not particularly drop safe. Essentially, there is a firing pin that kind of uses inertia inside this breech block, and if the gun is dropped at the perfect angle, the weight of the firing pin can be used to set off a round. We've known this forever, okay? This is not new to the 1911's development. They knew it from the very beginning and just kind of accepted it. There are a few things in place with the way the grip safety, obviously, and the thumb safety work, but even cocked and locked, if the gun's dropped at a certain angle, at a certain height, with enough inertia, that firing pin will go off. Does that mean the 1911 is not safe? No, just don't drop your damn pistol. Now, over the years, people have tried to kind of, we'll say, address this issue. The first real kind of use of that is let me back up. It's the Schwartz safety, the Schwartz firing pin safety. That came out originally in 1937. It was discontinued when Colt went to strictly military production in 1941, and they never brought it back. The reason being, you have to depress the grip safety all the way in order to free up the firing pin. if you're not familiar with shooting a 1911, you kind of think, man, that's not a bad idea. If you are familiar with shooting a 1911, you think, man, that kind of sucks, because sometimes your grip isn't the best when you get it out of the holster, and especially with the modern, and we'll get into this in a minute, with the modern grip safety methods, there are some things working against you and getting the grip safety fully 100% depressed. So it gets to be a little bit of a dicey situation. There's plenty of tales of gunfighters who had their guns in unique and uncomfortable situations, and their grip safety wasn't fully engaged, and they were unable to fire the pistol. So the Schwartz safety, there are some people who still use it. I am so glad that Alchemy Custom Weaponry is not among that fraternity. We use the traditional firing system of the 1911, so there's no need to worry about the Schwartz safety. The other thing is the 80 series firing pin system. So it came out in 1983. Pretty easy to check if you've got this. Just rack the gun back, look there, you'll see a plunger in the back of the breech block, and that'll tell you you have a 80 series firing pin safety. Now, there's a few things. Essentially what's happening is the trigger has to begin a rearward direction in order for the firing pin to free up. There's plenty of models to show you how this works. I'm not going to show you it, in detail, but essentially as the trigger bow moves forward, it engages a lever, which engages another lever, which pushes up on this plunger with a cutout. The plunger goes up into a certain point where the cutout allows the firing pin to move freely, and from there the firing pin obviously can move freely. When the hammer drops, the firing pin goes. Pretty good design, actually. I mean, if we're being honest, especially compared to the Schwartz, it's damn fine design, actually. I don't care for them because it does kind of degrade one of the 1911's best features, which is its trigger. It does kind of take away for a good trigger pull. Now, I'll be honest with you, a lot of good 1911 Smiths can fix that right up. This Clark Custom Meltdown, which is my birth year gun, by the way, 1998 built. Excuse me. This thing has a pretty exceptional 80 series trigger, and all the 80 series components are still in there. Now, you'll find on a lot of used 80 series guns from Colt, you'll find where those, such as that LE Comp especially in competition pistols like that, you'll find where the guts have been removed. Sometimes they actually will modify the portion that's in the ignition system. They'll modify that. Sometimes they'll take it out altogether, and there's a spacer to put in there because there is a larger cutout in the frame of an 80 series gun for that safety. And then sometimes they'll actually leave all that in there and just pull out the part in the slide. And that's okay, because really what's happening, what pressure you're feeling is the spring and the detent in the slide pushing down on those components that are then pushing on you, kind of pulling the trigger. So if you take that out, you really don't feel it, even though there's a couple extra parts in there. You'll definitely look at that on older guns, because sometimes they'll be taken out, sometimes they won't. Now this gun, every single piece of the 80 series system has been very, very, very highly polished, and this gun actually has a really good trigger. I mean, a really, really fantastic trigger. And I also believe that they either weakened or used a weaker spring on the plunger in the slide, because you really don't feel the fight back through the ignition system like you do on a stock 80 series gun. So all these things kind of to consider. And then the other safety, of course, besides the thumb and the grip safety, is the half cock notch. Now, I don't like calling the half cock notch a safety as much as a fail safe. If something happens in the gun and the hammer goes forward, but you're not really ready to fire, a lot of times the half cock notch will catch that hammer and prevent the gun from firing. So you do have several things in place to provide you a pretty safe pistol. If you're someone who frets over the gun dropping, the 80 series system is probably something you'd want. I don't really care about it. Most 1911 guys don't care about it, but it is something to consider. At the end of the day, I think most high-end 1911s, in fact, I think all high-end 1911s don't use the 80 series system, and there's a reason for that. It kind of sucks. So if you're kind of worrisome about it, don't be. Just grow a set, carry the gun. All right. So let's move on to a little bit of reliability stuff. I'm actually going to save, I have something on the grip safety, and this actually would be a great time to talk about it because we kind of moved through the safeties of the gun, but I kind of want to save it until the end of this particular section here. So magazines, they're the bread and butter of a 1911. You want a 1911 to run well? Get good magazines. Let me give you some examples. Wilson Combat makes good magazines. The ACW Act Mag, honestly, pretty badass magazines. I'm a big Wilson Combat magazine guy, but I've had zero issues at all in all the demos I've had with the Act Mags that we use for Wilson or for ACW, and they are a nice polished blue, which is nice. Now, one particular note about magazines, 9mm magazines. And honestly, 9mm magazines have a myriad of things you kind of have to watch out for. But essentially with a 9mm magazine, you have to understand that the 9mm bullet itself is shorter than a 45. So in order to kind of make it as long as a 45, a lot of magazines will have a spacer in the back to make sure it's kind of where it needs to be picked up by the slide to go into the chamber. That's all well and good, but sometimes you'll find that with, like, for instance, a Wilson Combat 9mm magazine, their feed lips are pretty tall. Now, the reason they're doing this is to get the round as high as possible to kind of give it the best shot into the chamber. That's great. The problem is that on some guns, it can cause the top of the magazine feed lips to scrape on the bottom of the breech block. You know, honestly, most of the time it's not going to be an issue functionally, but it does look like hell and it kind of sucks. So I would definitely check your gun before you use a 9mm Wilson Combat magazine. How do you check it, you might say? Well, I didn't bring out the right stuff, but I'm just going to walk you through it. Pretty simple. You take some marker, you take your magazine, you put that marker on the top of your magazine there, okay? You stick the magazine in the gun, hold down the magazine catch, of course, rack the gun a few times, pull the magazine out. If the marker's still there, great. Your breech block is not interfering with the top of the magazine. If it's not, then your breech block is definitely interfering with the top of the magazine. I've seen on the forums where some people have filed that down and had great experience. I haven't done that to any of mine, so I can't tell you one way or another. But the Trip Research mags work great. And of course, the Alchemy 9mm mags from Act mags, they work great as well. So definitely want to check those out. Now, the last thing before we get into some Fudd lore and interesting facts, this is a long video, I know, I warned you, by the way, I warned you before we got into this, is the grip safety. The grip safety on the 1911 has been its Achilles heel from the very beginning. It's something that has caused a lot of consternation for a lot of people. Some people really haven't ever had any issues. I'm actually in that camp. I've really never had any issues depressing the grip safety. Some people have had issues depressing the grip safety. So with that, there's been a lot of things over the years that have happened. The first and probably the most common early on in the 1911s development is pinning the grip safety. A lot of people, especially people who relied on the pistol, gunfighter types, would pin the grip safety on their gun. That way the grip safety basically was inactive. In fact, when you look at some of the pictures I have from the Columbia Conference, you'll see, even in 1976, that pinning the grip safety was very common. I have several custom guns from that era where they had pinned grip safeties or had the ability to have a pinned grip safety. It was extremely common. There are pictures of Texas Rangers in the pre-war period with pieces of rawhide tied around their pistols here to depress the grip safety at all times. It is something that was sort of an issue for the fighting man, if you will. Of course, the grip safety has its roots in the cavalry action, but the 1911 it outpaced the cavalry. Horse cavalry kind of went by the wayside. The 1911 still remained, and obviously the pistol had to be adapted for different uses. So, of course, there are different grips that will go into depressing the grip safety. This is something that a lot of people don't talk about, but there are different ways that you can hold the gun that will interact with the grip safety in different ways. So I'm going to pick Let's pick this one. This is a gun I just recently got from One Man Shop, and it's fantastic, so we'll use this. So when you're looking at the gun, okay, most people will tell you to ride the thumb safety, okay, and that's great. And in fact, that is the way I would show you to use a 1911, is to ride the thumb safety. And we do this for a couple of reasons. One, we get our hand up higher on the gun. We can help mitigate recoil a little bit better. The other thing is we're pinning the thumb safety down, because on a 1911 the thumb safety can engage with the breech block and it stops the pistol completely. You can't fire the gun, yes, but you can't even rack the slide. So it's important not to, have your thumb safety engage while you shoot. So you pin the grip safety, or excuse me, you pin the thumb safety, and that allows you the slide to move freely, and there's no chance that the thumb safety will engage and stop the slide. The other thing is it kind of acts like a gas pedal. It kind of gives you a good leverage point when you're shooting the pistol for controlling recoil. Now, a lot of older folks, you'll see them, they shoot the pistol thumbs down. This is a more revolver style grip, of course. More revolver style grip when the 1911 started, of course. Revolvers were the chief handgun for the American fighting man, and in fact, that didn't change much after the 1911 was introduced. In fact, I would say it really wasn't even until the late 70s, 80s that the automatic handgun really started getting a good hold on the American public. People were still using and trusting revolvers. So you see a lot of this revolver technique now. If you'll notice, if you're smart, if you're keen, you'll see that the gap here has closed dramatically as I've moved the position of my thumb. What's that mean? You're probably going to be able to depress the grip safety more reliably with this type of grip. Where are the cons? Well, of course, your grip kind of comes down off the gun a little bit, so you may experience a little bit of muzzle flip, if you will. I'll be honest with you, there's some badass shooters that shoot like this, so I'm not going to tell you it's a bad way to shoot. I'm just going to tell you it's not my way that I shoot. The other thing that I see happen is people who are not used to the mighty atomic power of the 45 ACP, under recoil, they end up engaging the thumb safety. So with their thumb below, they end up engaging the thumb safety, and that, again, locks the slide, and you can't use the gun. Well, you have to reach back up and turn the safety off. So for that reason, a lot of times I really don't like getting people on this thumbs down grip, because yes, it will help you with the grip safety depressing, but a lot of times you'll see that they'll knock the thumb safety up into the slide and stop the gun up. So you really want to focus on trying to really push the back of your palm into the pistol while you're firing. You really want to have some good pressure. Again, this is not some weak-ass gun. You really do have to be a man and manhandle this. And if you're a woman, manhandle it, okay? Listen, you have to, show this 1911 what's up, or it's going to show you what's up. So definitely want to be assertive with the gun and firm. I'll sit that back down. All right, and the other two things with the grip safety. So in an effort to kind of combat the grip safety issue, there were several things that were happening. And most famously, I think, is the Novak Answer, as you can see on Ken Hackthorne's Novak pistol right here. The Novak Answer, which is a one-piece kind of backstrap to the pistol that completely takes away any grip safety there at all. This gun was built for Ken by Wayne and Company, and Ken has notoriously been a guy who's pinned his grip safety, so it makes a lot of sense he would have a pistol like this. But I know what you're thinking. You're thinking to yourself, but Eli, you almost never see pinned grip safeties. You certainly don't see the Answer very often. And you can think a few gun writers who made up a bunch of, if you got into a defensive shooting, you could have that thrown against you for deactivating a safety. There's no actual cases where that's happened, but of course, the gun writers, especially in the 80s and 90s, they just like to fabricate things, and that's one of them. So, you know what you're thinking. You're saying to yourself, Eli, why don't we see a lot of pinned grip safeties now? Or, anything like that. Well, you actually do. In the 2011 world, that's something that's pretty common. Taping your grip safety. I think it looks stupid taping it. Just pin it like a man. But, we've got all their goon tapes and all of our tape companies. We've got to, it's got to be tacked to queer. So, you tape it up and you go about your day. You put pictures of it on Instagram. But in about the late 80s, 90s. I could be wrong on that time period, but it definitely somewhere in there. People were starting to weld tabs to the back of their to the back of their grip safeties, okay, to give them more material to engage the grip safety sooner, if that makes sense. You wouldn't have to push your hand into the gun so much to get the grip safety engaged to where it needed to be. And a guy named Ed Brown kind of took that and decided to make his own version of it, and I think he called it the memory bump. So it's that classic bump you see on the back of a grip safety nowadays, right here. It allows you to not have to be so far in on the pistol to depress the grip safety, okay? And really, that actually helped a ton of people. In fact, you look at a lot of, even I got one of Ken's guns that was built in the early 90s, right after actually the Novak Answer, and you'll notice he has the memory bump, but of course it does not have the pinned grip safety. So that actually rectified a lot of the issues for shooters, and you know, that's why you see that as sort of the norm. It's kind of uncommon for a 1911 to not have that grip safety, unless of course they're trying to invoke a little bit of nostalgia, because of course the original guns did not have memory bumps on their grip safety, so it was a lot harder to depress them. So yeah, that's kind of why you don't see pinned grip safety so often these days. Is just because really the memory bump alleviated a lot of the issues. However, I'll be honest with you, if we could turn around and make an answer for the Alchemy guns right now, brother, I'd do it, okay? I don't really care about the grip safety being there, and I actually think the answer feels nicer than having a grip safety, so I'm on team no grip safety. But, you know, I'm sure some horse riding, you know, cavalryman is going to have something to say about that. All right, so I know this is a long video, but I appreciate you sticking with me. We're at kind of the halfway point. I want to quickly, and very quickly, I want to give a shout out to guns.com. Couldn't do this without them. They've got some great things on their certified use. Please check them out. I think you will love what you see and you'll love what you find. So make sure you go check them out. The other thing is I've got a new sponsor I want to introduce to you. That's Delray Watch in Florida, okay? And in fact, what I'm going to try to add into the videos is a little bit of a wrist check. To kind of show you the watch I'm wearing, maybe something about it, I don't know. And that way I can kind of share my growing interest and love for watches that has definitely grown over the year quite rapidly. Kind of share that with you. Of course, with the support of Delray. They are great people. I've been very happy with every interaction I've had with them. Of course, you know, that I wouldn't take them on as a sponsor if I didn't believe in the company. That's kind of something I've always kept pretty near and dear to me, is I don't want to kind of show y'all things that I just, okay, I'm getting a paycheck and, you know, I don't care how y'all are treated. Really great people, good prices on watches. And for today's wrist check, I'm going to have to show you the watch I got from them, and that is the Omega Seamaster Professional Chronometer 300 meter. So this is kind of the Brosnan era. This is actually last year production, 2006. Omega Seamaster Professional 300 meter of this style. So very Brosnan era. Brosnan, of course, is my favorite Bond, so it only made sense to have this watch, and I really love it. It feels great on the wrist. I thought maybe, I used to really not care for big tool watches like this. This has actually been a really fantastic watch to wear all day, and honestly, it's a sharp looking watch. It kind of invokes a little bit of nostalgia, but it's, you know, new enough that I don't worry about wearing it every day, unlike something like my 68 Rolex or 63 Rolex, where I don't like wearing those every day. This is something that I see as a real hard use, everyday tool watch, and that's how I'm going to be using it. So again, check out Delray Watch. Tell them I sent you. You'll enjoy everything you see. If you like 1911s, you probably like watches. So let's get back into it. We're now into the Fudd lore section. Honestly, this is the part I'm most excited about. I kind of wish I'd have done this first, but I had some stuff we had to clear up on the 1911 first. So let's get straight into this. I'm going to hit you with one that's been super controversial, and that is dropping the slide on an empty chamber. Now, I've seen all y'all, you know, Insta whores out there saying, oh, you know, oh, the Fudd say I can't drop my slide on an empty chamber. Listen, there's some reason they tell you to do that, okay? Or tell you not to do that, in fact. You sit there and you think you know everything. You don't. Okay, Gen Z. I know I'm talking to my own generation, but it really seems a problem of, if an old person says it, then it must not be true, which is the most ridiculous thing ever, because old people have went through a lot more life than we have. So, I'm not saying that everything that comes out of an old person's mouth is something you should agree with, but I am saying that some of that shit you probably should pay attention to. And now I'm going to learn you up on why you shouldn't drop your slide on an empty chamber. Now, a lot of times you hear this and it just kind of say, don't do it, move on. Now I'm going to tell you why not to do it. The original GI spec guns had hammer hooks that are around 30 thou. This made the hammer hooks a lot more robust, but what does that translate to? Not a great trigger pull. The original GI guns, dude, have like a 5 to 7 pound trigger pull. Not the beautiful trigger, 3.5 pound trigger that you would get with an Alchemy Custom Weaponry Prime. It's not great. And they did that, of course, on purpose to make the guns more robust. With a GI gun, it's really not going to be super detrimental if you sit there and you drop the slide on an empty chamber. However, those sears and hammers are not made of the best materials. So doing that over time begins to jar the relationship between the sear and the hammer hooks. And over time, that can cause them to degrade rapidly, making your trigger pull worse, or cause the hammer hooks to break or the sear to chip or something where it's not really something you want. And let's be honest, there's zero reason to drop a slide on an empty chamber on a gun. On a gun in general, not just a 1911, on a gun in general, there's zero reason for it, okay? So don't do it. On our new guns, the materials of the sear and the hammers are much more robust. However, it's still unnecessary wear. On a modern 1911, you'll notice that they have way shorter hammer hooks to give you a better trigger. They have better materials. So, doing that a couple of times, if you accidentally do it or if you hand your gun to a friend and new gun and he does it, still whoop his ass. But then, don't worry too much about your gun getting messed up. Now, if you got an older custom gun, like an LE Comp or like my Swenson, stuff like that, where they're using the old materials, and which are not great, by the way, and they start doing that, okay, then it's time, to break out the people's elbow and open up a can of whoop ass, because that's just going to really, really, really mess up your gun. So that completely tells you why you should not be doing that. And people will say, oh, I can do it with my Glock. Well, yes, you can, because the Glock trigger system is completely different than the 1911. It's apples to motherfuckers, okay? Excuse my language, but that was kind of funny to me. I just came up with it. But it's a completely different trigger system, and so it's not going to react the same way. Okay, that sear and hammer relation will degrade if you continue to drop the slide on an empty chamber. It's very bad for the gun, so don't do it. Okay, and again, it's unnecessary. There's no reason to do it. Moving on. Bumper pads. This is actually a pretty good one. I got one right here. So, I'll just keep this note back. So the bumper pads on pistols, or on magazines, excuse me. So originally those actually started off with leather pads that were kind of glued to the bottom of like a GI magazine, right? Pretty cool, actually. I don't have one of those, but I think it'd be pretty cool. I think Armand Swenson actually used to make some too and send them with your gun. But anyways, I was talking to Ken Hackthorne about this the other day, and he kind of clued me in that they actually weren't originally designed for dropping, but rather inserting. And it makes a lot of sense. If you've ever loaded the magazine on a 1911, especially with a GI magazine, you have maybe loaded it, went to close your slide stop there, sent the slide home, go up to shoot, and nothing happens because you didn't load around because the magazine's still hanging out a little bit. And so the bumper actually helps you to load the magazine. Now, later on, it kind of started getting double duty. A lot of bumper plates are great for dropping on hard surfaces so you don't mess up your magazines. And even in the competition era, you'll see a lot of weighted, like this is a big brass weighted magazine there. You'll see a lot of weighted mags so that the mags will get out of the gun faster while you're doing a reload, so you don't kind of, run into an exiting mag as you put in a new mag, which can happen sometimes. So I thought that was a fun thing to kind of tell you. It's not really that deep into the lore, but it is something kind of interesting that you can kind of bring up at a cocktail party. I don't know. All right. The next one I want to talk about, oh, this is a big one too. This is kind of like dropping a slide on an empty chamber. And that is loading a round into the chamber and then sending the slide home. People, it's not even really good to do on a modern polymer gun, much less a 1911. The 1911 is designed to kind of control feed. So as the breech block comes forward, it picks up the round slips under the extractor and into the chamber. Okay, you have to understand the geometry of the extractor. It is curved like this and has a hook on the end of it. If you put a round into the chamber and then drop your slide on the chamber, which, by the way, part of the reason you might think, well, why does the whole sending the slide home on an empty chamber, why does that not apply to live firing? Well, I just kind of explained it to you. The round getting picked up by the slide kind of delays the slide a little bit or slows it down just a hair, just enough that it's not so abrasive to your hammer and sear. Although I have seen where over time, if you shoot a gun a lot and you've dropped the hammer hooks down on it pretty significantly, they're going to eventually wear. I mean, that's just how the cookie crumbles. So always be careful of that, especially on vintage custom guns. Okay, that's one category. One thing you always want to check is your hammer hooks to make sure they weren't, some gunsmith wasn't really trying to run the gamut on getting a really good trigger pull and they dropped them down to like 16th thou. Ask me how I know that. But anyways, so you don't want to send the slide home with a round in the chamber. Couple of reasons. As I've mentioned before, that's just not how the 1911 was designed to load, but also you're going to bend out, your extractor has to bend out to go around the rim of the casing. That's going to affect your extractor tension over time, and that's also going to put a lot of wear on the claw of your extractor, which could eventually either cause it to wear dramatically or break, period, just break. So don't do that. I've seen a lot of people do that. It makes my, like, the thing in the back of my head go crazy and I like start seeing red. Don't do it. Not good. Moving on. The trigger shape. Now, this one I really personally don't care about. Hackathorn and I were talking about it. He feels very strongly about it, so I figured we'd talk about it. Trigger shape on a 1911. You see them with, and of course, I forgot to bring a friggin' flat face trigger, but I got a couple of flat face trigger guns. Of course, the classic curved. Some of them try to do like a half flat, half curve. Listen, I don't think it makes much of a difference. Why is that? Your trigger is in a trigger track in the frame, okay? The trigger bow is sitting in a trigger track. It can only go backwards like this. So, the thought process behind a flat face trigger is that wherever you are on the trigger, it's going to be an even trigger pull backwards. I'm going to be honest with you. Wherever you are on a curved trigger, it's going to be the same because the trigger can only go backwards, okay? It's not like it's got a fulcrum or a pivot there where if you pull it up higher, it's harder than if you pull it up lower. The trigger only moves backwards. So no matter if you're high or low on the trigger pad, it's not going to matter. And in fact, a curved trigger is nice because if you are high, you can just rock back into that curve and you're back in the money. I think a flat trigger is fine. I've shot them. I've had the perception myself that maybe they're better. After really analyzing it, I don't really see a difference. So just something to think about. It's super cool if you want to do it for an aesthetic reason. If you just like one thing or another, this isn't me telling you you should never use a flat trigger. This is just me saying, hey, they're not as important as you may think. The other thing I want to talk about, full metal jackets are the only thing that works in 1911. Big thing in the 1911 world, or a lot of people who are opposed to 1911s only say that the gun runs with full metal jackets. And it is true, the gun was designed to a certain ogive of a certain full metal jacket that it was supposed to use. You can kind of combat this by a couple of different ways. Of course, you can get the gun action and reliability tuned, and usually a gunsmith will correct anything in a stock gun that would prevent it from feeding jacketed hollow points. Or of course you can find jacketed hollow points that are more in line with the original ogive of the full metal jacket. There's plenty of options there. But I'll be honest with you, most modern 1911s are pretty much set up well enough that they're going to run about anything. I run Super Veil. I think the box is back there. I run the Supervel 160s a lot, the flying ashtray. Dude, I've chambered those suckers in just about every gun I've owned. In fact, I've chambered pretty much every jacketed hollow point I've ever ran across into like old Colts, like GI Colts, and never really had an issue from there. So maybe I'm just lucky, but you know, it's one of those things where I really think that's blown out of proportion. And I think really if you do have the issue, just buy whatever jacketed hollow points do work in the pistol. It's not that serious, you know. So moving on. All right. The last one. Oh, I've got a couple things actually. I just lied to you. A couple things. So the next thing I want to talk about is slotted grip screws. I know this is sort of one of those things that you might think, is that really something we need to talk about? You're damn right. It's something we need to talk about, and let's talk about it. Functionally and aesthetically, they're the best. Now, you might say, oh, I like the way Torx grip screws look, blah, blah, blah. You're wrong. Slotted grip screws look better. This really isn't up for opinion, you know, up for debate. This isn't really an opinion thing. If you think that, you're wrong. So flat, you know, slotted grip screws just look better. You can use anything to tighten them, okay? Casing of a 45, literally whatever. You don't need a special tool to tighten them. Grip screws come loose. It happens on the range pretty often. Just use a 45, crank them closed, or a screwdriver. But even if you don't have a screwdriver, there's plenty of things you can use to tighten the grip screws. A lot of Torx head screws round off, making them some bitch to actually tighten or take off. And then the other thing is a lot of those have been over heat treated, so they are really brittle and they'll snap off if you tighten them too much. So that's always kind of an issue. And also with the slotted grip screws, you get a really clean clocking of the grip screws. I'm sure you're not gonna be able to tell from here, but you can get a really clean clocking of the grip screws when you use like O-rings. I use the VZ O-rings, and that allows you to be able to clock the grip screws in line with either the cock serrations or like the diamonds of the grips, whatever it is. It's just a really nice look to the pistol. And then the last thing that I'm going to talk about in this particular section, and then there is one more thing after that, so kind of a lie to you again. The last thing for this section is keep that sumbitch old, okay? A lot of people, they want to say, oh, 1911s don't run dirty, blah, blah, blah. Yes, they do. They actually run pretty fine dirty. What they don't run well in is dry. So you go, keep you some all around. Listen, look at me. I'm like P. Diddy up in here. If you watch this many years from now, this reference may not hit the way it's going to right now. But anyways, look it up. P. Diddy, all. He's a big fan. But be like P. Diddy, okay? Can never have enough all. I got Trident, Charlotte Performance Trident. I've got Wilson Combat, Ulta Lube. I don't even really care what it is. I'll spit in the sumbitch. You just got to keep some lubrication on the pistol to keep it working. Even when the gun's really dirty, you'll find that keeping lubrication in it will allow you to keep it going just a little bit longer until you can actually take some time to clean it. So yeah, a lot of people want to say, oh, my 1911 doesn't work, and then you grab a hold of their 1911 and, you know, it's drier than your girlfriend after she found out that you bought a plastic pistol. It's just one of those things. You got to keep it lubed. Always have, always will have to, okay? So that is my advice to you. I've got one more thing I want to talk, and this probably is the most important. All right, last thing, and then you're off the hook. Go to recess. No homework. The last thing, the biggest Fudd lie, New Age, conspiracy is that the 1911 is not a good carry gun. Are you shitting me? The 1911 is the original fighting automatic. It is the gun that changed how all automatics from it were going to be made. It is the epitome of the American fighting spirit, and you're going to tell me it's not a good gun? Because it's heavy. It doesn't hold enough rounds. Why don't you grow the hell up? Wear a real belt. Dress like a man. You won't have any issues concealing a 1911. It is one of the most powerful handguns you can own. Even if you... Listen, 45 ACP, that's the round, okay? You're never going to convince me it's not. I don't care what science-based shit you bring to me. Oh, this ballistic gel. Oh, this, and that, and the other. 45 ACP was designed in a stockyard killing cattle, okay? It was designed by shooting cadavers, okay? None of this ballistics gel bullshit, okay? It was designed to put things down, All right? And I will continue to believe that 45 ACP is the greatest round that you could possibly put into a handgun. But let's say that you're some delusional psychopath that thinks 10 millimeter is a great thing. Guess what? 1911s are made in 10 millimeter. I don't agree with it personally, but hey, it's there for you. Moving on from that, the gun is thin. It's relatively thin, right? Because it's single stack. So it's a pretty thin gun. You can pretty much carry it in any outfit. Of course, it being heavy, you typically do need a belt. So if you sit there and say, well, I can't carry it in my board shorts, well, no shit, okay? Let's use some common sense. More than any other automatic handgun ever in existence, either now or in the past, the 1911 has had the most combat experience from law enforcement, from civilians, from military. It has been in service for over a century, people. It has been a product of evolution and experience, thus that it creates the absolute fine fighting utensil that it is today, okay? So all that experience, all that nostalgia in history is put into this pistol to protect your life every day. And if you know how to use it, it's really not an issue. It's got several safety measures, right? We've talked about that earlier in the video. It's got several safety measures to prevent you from, accidentally discharging it or something like that. There are things in place that make this gun incredibly safe if you're someone who cares about that. And finally, and really this is the one I need you to understand the most, okay? So come a little closer, all right? It's the most American firearm you could possibly carry, save possibly the Colt Single Action Army. When you think of the United States of America, this pistol comes to mind. We carried this son of a bitch from 1911 until now, technically 1912. You get what I'm saying? We've carried the gun for over a century in either the law enforcement, military, or civilian world. It has been on the hips of Americans who went across the oceans and whooped ass, okay? It's been on the hips of gunfighters in the West. It's been on the hips of gangsters in the East. It is the epitome of American fighting excellence. It's our Excalibur. It's our katana. The Japanese have, these swords they pass down through generations. You don't understand, the American nation doesn't even predate firearms. The firearm is our katana that we pass down through generations. And in 5 or 6 generations, do you think they want a plastic pistol? No, they want the epitome of American excellence, okay? That is what our generations, in the future, that's what they're going to want. Okay, when we finally go to colonize Mars, I hope we greet those Martian sons of bitches with looking down the barrel of this 45 caliber pistol. Because listen, we got 2 world wars, we might as well add a galactic war on top of it. It is just, there is so much emotion in carrying a 1911. And I know, listen, you're in a world that wants to preach to you practical this, practical that. Electric cars are a thing, okay, because everybody's worried about practicality. Electric cars are stupid, by the way. And I'm here to tell you that maybe you can have practicality and badassery in the same, space with this gun. It does everything you need it to do. It looks better than any other gun doing it. And it is just undeniably the most American thing that you could possibly own, outside of maybe a NASCAR stock car. Those are a little hard to get. It is just something I believe in my heart, and I'm trying to get y'all to understand this ain't a character. This ain't a joke. I believe the American fighting man should have a 1911 on his hip. I believe that with every fiber of my being. I think that we have failed the future generations by allowing plastic guns to usurp the 1911's place as the American fighting pistol. There's a book about the Glock that's called, I think it's called America's Gun. It irritates me every time I see that, but you got to understand, you got to know, what you're going against. So I got the book. But you have to understand, every time I see that book, it ignites a fire in me that I have to make that book false. I have to convince you that there is no pistol that you would rather have on your hip than a 1911. There's nothing that feels like it. I have so many people who, they at one time carried a plastic gun in their wayward, you know, sin, then they went into getting a 1911, and the emotion that they have with that is unlike any other handgun that they've ever carried. The only exception, I think, to the rule is possibly an old revolver. Okay, revolvers are pretty gangster, and revolvers are another one of those pistols that are inherently American. We've done them better than everyone else. Everyone's talked about all these foreign revolvers that are so highly made. Guess what? The Smith & Wesson Model 27 exists, and nothing else really needs to exist other than that. I digress. What I'm trying to tell you is American steel handguns is what you deserve, it's what your future generations deserve, and it's what America deserves, okay? It's the gun that God wants the American people to carry into battle. It's our Gladius. It is a gun that has had so much history with the American people that it feels wrong to give up on it now. And as I've laid out, if you're someone who's really committed to the pistol, okay? You're really committed to learning about it. You want to become an enthusiast. This is not a gun for someone who says, I need a gun for defense, and that's really all I care about the gun for. Not a gun for them. This is a gun for the firearm enthusiast, someone who loves guns, someone who's interested in how they work, what makes them work, how to keep them working. That's what this gun's for, okay? Now, with that, let me step off my soapbox. It's been a long video, probably the longest video I've put out, actually, I would say. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've learned some things. And listen, I'm always down to learn stuff too. So if there's something I missed, something that you could help me elaborate on, drop it in the comments. If there's questions you have, please let me know. And if I don't know it, listen, I got, you know, Jason Burton, you know, Rob Shaw and Ken Hackathorn, all these guys who know way more than me and will know more than I'll ever know on speed dial. I'll find out the answer to the question and make a damn video about it so that everyone is more inclined to buy a 1911. I feel that that's really the problem, is that people aren't well informed. You walk into a gun store, you see some virgin behind the counter with a P320 in, you know, a Safariland rig, and he looks like he can't do a push-up, all right? And he's sitting there, well, you know, the 1911 is not really a reliable pit. Shut up! In the words of The Rock, these people don't really know what they're talking about. They're getting force-fed whatever the social media show them, and they don't ever take the time. Let me tell you right now, you walk in there and you ask that nerd behind the counter who's got the P320, ask him who Charlie Askins is. Ask him if he's ever read some of that. Guarantees probably not. So they really are only, you know, telling you what's been regurgitated to them online. They're not trying to learn on their own. And listen, I've soared with the eagles, I've slithered with the snakes. And at the end of the day, the only gun that interests me to a high level is the 1911. And there's got to be a reason for that. Why don't you find out? Listen, been a great video. Hope you've enjoyed it. Remember, if you are carrying a 1911, carry it cocked and locked. We'll see you next time.